Now this is the tier of men that you'll start seeing women thirsting over them in the comments, like what happened with Luigi Mangione, who also scored. If you've ever wondered how attractive you are facially, this video will give you a realistic idea on where you land on the look scale. The main point behind this video is that physical attractiveness is largely objective. Think of facial symmetry, bone structure, proportions, leanness, and how they influence your looks. So I've designed this scale to assess that physical attractiveness and find out where you land on that scale. For every score out of 10, I will provide a few faces, and I'll try to include different ethnicities as well, because an 8 out of 10 Northern European man obviously looks very different from an 8 out of 10 Sub-Saharan African man. And with each rating, I'll also provide a brief explanation. So without further ado, let's start with the 0 out of 10s. The bottom 0.001% or even lower. So most people in this category are either suffering from some kind of medical condition or had an accident, so of course they deserve our sympathy, but in terms of facial attractiveness, they land at the very bottom. The first example I've got lined up for this category is Nathan Kahina, if I pronounce his name correctly. Even without explanation, I think people understand why this is what's considered a 0 out of 10. With his face, he even makes babies cry.
I love messing with kids.
Yeah, it's okay. It's from a test tube. Oh, you're okay.
As we know, babies stare longer at attractive faces as opposed to unattractive faces. So it would make sense that his face would make the baby cry. Now, I'm not completely delusional and understand that he is making a face at the baby as well. And babies do cry at the most random things too. But I just wanted to touch on the point that our ability to judge facial attractiveness is mostly ingrained in our brain before we're even born, rather than attractiveness being societally determined, as some people think nowadays. We explored this topic more in the 2 videos that will be linked in the description. Another face I've selected for this category is Lesser Green, aka Beetlejuice. What makes him a 0 out of 10 is also very visible. I'm not going to run a whole analysis on his face to further prove that, but this gives you an idea of what a 0 out of 10 looks like. Next up, a 1 out of 10. For this rating, it was honestly really hard to find faces that accurately depict a 1 out of 10. Out of 1,000 faces, since it's the bottom 0.1%, a face in this category would be at the very bottom in terms of physical attractiveness. But here, you do step out of the range of deformities, but still have severe structural issues or extremely high body fat percentages. So here are the 2 examples that I've selected as a 1 out of 10. The first one is also commonly used in memes as the Discord mod. Realistically, if you line up 1,000 faces, this may be at the very bottom at facial attractiveness. I would say he comes closer to a 2 out of 10. So his true rating would be around this 1.5 or 1.75 out of 10, because he does have some features that are carrying him, like his eyebrows, his hairline, and lip thickness. But other than that, along with the high body fat percentage, pretty much everything else looks bad. The acne, the ungroomed beard, the eye shape, which is of course being distorted by the glasses. But that's what makes him a 1 out of 10. Most people who are a 1 out of 10 could become at least a 2 out of 10 by grooming only, and losing body weight would have the biggest impact, possibly even reaching a 3 out of 10 or higher. Next up are the 2 out of 10s. Here I selected this face. You might know this guy from the video Being Ugly, My Experience. So in the 2 out of 10 category, it's not necessarily an accident or some kind of medical condition causing the ugliness, but more the underdevelopment of the facial bones along with having bad features. If you look at his face, it's almost as if he has 0 good features. The previous guy, who was a 1 out of 10, did have some good features, but his body fat percentage knocked him down to a 1 out of 10. So this guy, his hairline is bad, the hair itself doesn't look healthy, he has no eyebrows, terrible teeth, his jaws are severely recessed, he has a thin neck, very pale looking skin color as well. But here it could be due to the lighting. So pretty much all of his facial features are bad. Luckily, since he had a huge amount of exposure, he did end up finding a wife, I believe after 26 million people having watched his video. So that's good for him. He himself did say in the video that if you're in the same predicament, surgery is the only way to stop people treating you badly due to your looks. And before we move on, here are some more faces that would score a 2 out of 10 for reference. In this category, the 3 out of 10s, we've got the following face. namely MMA fighter Raul Rosas. He looks like the guy from a 0 out of 10 who scares babies, but then without the severe deformities. Even if you look at the comments in the videos of him, you see a lot of them are about his face instead of his fighting skills. Like people saying he has a face only a mother could love. I hope he doesn't see that I rated him a 3 out of 10 though, because he would smack the shit out of me. Or maybe he'd just say this. The reason he scores a 3 out of 10 is his severely recessed maxilla, which is also the reason why his nose looks like that and why he has an underbite. He looks like he'd be a great candidate for a L4-1 surgery, which moves the upper jaw forward. The reason he's not a 2 out of 10 is that he does have some good features, like the jawline visibility and his hair and healthy clear skin. His eyebrows are also not bad, but also not good. This next face, who goes by the name Oreo Man or Savvy Guy, would also score a 3 out of 10. In his case, it's not a structural issue, but more because of his high body fat percentage. If he'd be at the same body fat percentage as Raul Rosas, he'd probably be a 4 or even 5 out of 10. If you put the faces next to each other, I would say that Oreo Man looks slightly more attractive, so his true rating would be closer to a 3.5. Fat people will most of the time end up in this category, depending on how fat, of course. So the 3 out of 10s also have either a structural issue or high body fat percentages, or maybe both. But having both would push you more to a 2 out of 10. For the 4 out of 10s, let's do an experiment. Take a look at this face. What rating would you give it out of 10 if the eyes are covered? While doing this experiment, I've heard different ratings. Some people saying 6 or 7 out of 10, but the shocker comes when you uncover his eyes. Even with the rest of his face looking good, the eyes instantly land him at a 4 out of 10. Sometimes you're only as attractive as your worst feature. He would be much better off having an average jaw, an average nose, and average eyes and eyebrows, rather than having some good features and one terrible feature. It could be just one facial feature that ruins the rest of your face when you're a 4 out of 10. So at the 4 out of 10 rating, we start to approach the more average kind of looking faces. Still somewhat ugly, but nothing too severe. Another example of a 4 out of 10 is Jay-Z. In his case, it's his long, narrow face. I understand that he's pushing 60 right now and used to look better when he was younger. But here I can make the point that you typically lose attractiveness the older you get. So don't believe the people telling you that men age like fine wine. There are some outliers like Brad Pitt, who looks better despite his age. But even he looked better when he was younger. If you want me to personally assess your face and tell you where you land on the look scale, you can check the link in the description where I'll give you a rating, an analysis of your good and bad features, facial measurements, and advice how you could improve. So if you're interested, you can head to my website. Next, 5 out of 10. This is the rating that most people get, and here's the face that I've selected for this tier. James from The Odd Ones Out. In his face, you can see that he's definitely not ugly, but not necessarily attractive either, which is exactly what a 5 out of 10 is. His best feature would be his eye area, though he appears to have some scleral show when his face is neutral. And his main flaw would be not enough bone mass in his face, while also not being lean enough to show the bone mass that he does have. His dimorphism, which means how masculine he looks, and his features also aren't good enough to score higher than a 5 out of 10. In this picture where he's grown a beard, he does start to look more masculine, which brings him closer to a 6 out of 10. So one way to be a 5 out of 10 is if all your features look average. Another way is if you have some very good features and some bad features, like this face, with a very good eye area, but a below average jaw. I'd argue that in the 5 out of 10 category, the most subjectivity comes into play. You'll have a portion of people agreeing with the face is a 4 or 6 out of 10. So in conclusion, a 5 out of 10 means you either have average features everywhere, or you have some 6 or 7 out of 10 features along with some below average features. There are so many different ways to be a 5 out of 10 facially, as it's also the score that most people get. So as you might have noticed, the way this scale works is that it's a bell curve. Only giving someone a number without further explanation is not a good way to rate, which is where the percentile comes in. For example, the 50th percentile is exactly average, as we've seen, and the 99th percentile is the top 1%. In this scale, we chose 5 out of 10 as the exact average for looks, so top 50%, and every step from this rating is a step down on the bell curve. So a 4 out of 10 is bottom 25%, a 6 out of 10 top 25%, a 3 out of 10 is bottom 10%, and a 7 out of 10 is top 10%, and so on. While taking these steps, we'll eventually reach a 10 out of 10, which is extremely rare. But on the other side of the bell curve, a 0 out of 10 is also very rare. So that's the idea behind the bell curve. In this video, as I said before, I do not take into account decimal points like 5.75 out of 10 or 8.25 out of 10 for the sake of the length of the video. But I do mention it when I think it's necessary. Now let's go to the 6 out of 10s. In this tier, as a man, you might get occasional compliments about how you look, but it's usually not like, oh my god, this man is so hot. A good example is Aaron Paul. While he does have a good looking face objectively, he also has some flaws which bring him down to a 6 out of 10. His biggest and most notable flaw is his unbalanced facial thirds. His upper third is too large vertically, and while his jaw is angular and masculine, it ideally could be a bit larger in general, with a longer ramus and a bigger chin. Another 6 out of 10 face is Michael B. Jordan. Definitely an above average face, but lacking in forward growth and angularity, and his eyebrows could also be better. Next, 7 out of 10. Now, if you're in this tier, you're actually attractive. I'll provide 2 examples of a 7 out of 10. First, we got Timothée Chalamet. His good features are that he has a very angular face that shows bone mass, along with his dark eyebrows and overall above average eye area. What stops him from being an 8 out of 10 is that his harmony is not ideal. For example, he has a very pointy chin rather than a square one, and he has a very short ramus. All of this makes him look more feminine. Now that I've given an example of a 7 out of 10 on the feminine end of the spectrum, here's a 7 out of 10 on the more masculine end. Anthony Joshua. His face is definitely not perfect, but the bone mass, forward growth, symmetry, and his features are all on point. Some flaws he has are having a bit of a longer mid-face, large interpupillary distance, and eyelid exposure. Now this is the tier of men that you'll start seeing women thirsting over them in the comments, like what happened with Luigi Mangione, who also scores a 7 out of 10. Now 8 out of 10. In this category, everything needs to be on point, but you still can have some minor flaws. You can't look as feminine anymore, like Timothée Chalamet, so you'll need good harmony, good features, and good dimorphism, which in this case is more masculinity. And the quote-unquote minor flaws in this category, since the face is already attractive, the flaws might even be seen as a good thing. For example, with Brad Pitt, whose flaw is slight negative eyebrow tilt, but since almost everything else in his face is ideal, the eyebrow tilt might even be seen as a good thing. While in other tiers, this would be more detrimental to physical attractiveness. Same with Jeremy Meeks, who's bald and has sparse eyebrows, or Henry Cavill, with his large eye width to height ratio and eyelid exposure. And here are some more faces that can be considered an 8 out of 10. Next up, we've got 9 out of 10. So far, I've personally not given out this score through my face rating services. Maybe one of you can change that. But the fact that I've not given this score so far tells you how rare it is. You might see some people rating Henry Cavill as a 9 out of 10, but his hairline and eye area make that impossible, as they are considered flaws. In order to be a 9 out of 10, you can't have any minor flaws either anymore, let alone major flaws like balding or eye spacing. It's almost impossible to encounter a 9 out of 10 in real life. The first face that I've selected for this tier is Hernan Drago. To me personally, Hernan Drago always looked like Henry Cavill, with a better hairline and eye area. It's almost impossible to find a flaw in his face, which is exactly why he can be considered a 9 out of 10. While with 8 out of 10s, you can find 1 or 2 minor flaws. Another example of a 9 out of 10 is John Eric Hexam. Same story as Hernan Drago, and Louis Allen III can also be considered a 9 out of 10. Or maybe he would be an 8.5 out of 10. Next, a 10 out of 10. To be a 10 out of 10, you would need to be perfect in terms of literally everything. In videos like Face IQs, he shows this as a 10 out of 10, in which I hope he's joking. If you spend too much time on TikTok, you might think that this is a 10 out of 10. This barely even looks human, let alone the perfect human. While it was easier to find 0 out of 10 faces, because it's easier to have a lot of flaws, almost every deviation from the ideal lowers your score. But there's only one way to get it right. You can compare it to a chess game. In chess, in most positions, especially when you're out of the opening, there's often only 1 or 2 right moves that you can play, and anything else would instantly lose the game. There are hundreds of ways to do it wrong, but only a few ways to do it right, which is what makes chess so hard. Now, here's an AI generated face that I found while creating this video, which comes very close to a 10 out of 10. If you do know any true 10 out of 10 faces, you can drop a comment. So that was the whole ranking video. If you have any thoughts, you can leave a comment. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.